is From Breaches to Best Practices, Securing the Future of Digital Platforms. So we have the great James Civic from Mastercard here to moderate the panel. So should we give them a round of applause to welcome them? Bring the energy before lunch.
Hey, thanks very much, all. This is on.
No, it's on.
Okay, good. Yeah, so thanks all for joining us, especially 30 minutes before lunch. Hope this is actually worth your time. And I would say for a good sunny morning, but clearly they've shut the blinds, so yeah, good morning. I thought I'd just start off with something light, just as general introductions, because everyone loves a good stat. So nearly 54 people every second fall or are fall victim to a cyber attack. And it's usually something that we're quite unaware of. Whilst I always talk about that, how many people in this room, 100 people, whilst I've talked, we've probably all been breached at some point in the last 5 seconds. Average cost of a successful attack is about $330,000 per device, about $6.3 billion on the whole for business email compromise scams. In Australia, obviously, we're quite aware of a lot of the large data breaches that have happened. I'm not going to ask for any hands up, but obviously Qantas, Optus, Salesforce, McDonald's, if anyone kind of went through the hiring process with them in their past lives. And we're constantly having news around identity compromises, scams, and the like, where someone has been engineered. So ultimately, within the FinTech world, the proceeds of crime, they're going towards actually, criminals trying to get hold of the data, they're trying to make that payment. So what we brought through here is not at a more compliance-oriented discussion. Brought 2 business leaders here to introduce, to actually talk through the discussions or decisions that they want to go through when they actually are looking at how they handle the data that they are working on in their businesses. So I'll hand across, first of all, to panelist Bill. Do you want to introduce yourself, talk about what Skip does, and go through that?
Perfect. Bill Bezos, I'm the CEO of Skip. I am a bit jet lagged, I'm not going to lie. I just got back yesterday, so 3 hours sleep, but we'll get through this. I head up Skip, so I've been doing that for the last 12 years. It's a pre-order pay collect app, for those that don't know. We work with cafes predominantly and enable customers to be able to pre-order, pay, collect and skip those queues. As I mentioned, we started 12 years ago. We've since developed the product. We now enable QR table ordering, delivery where the business does their own delivery service. We do catering, and of recent, we've also branched into schools for lunch orders, parents ordering their kids' lunch, and that's an area that we're continuing to expand. We work with businesses that are holes in the wall, so little small one-owner businesses offering coffee and little pastries to larger chains. And also the likes of Qantas, Woolworths, WH Smiths, where they've got a lot of sites. It's a business that's continued to grow since day dot, which has been fantastic. We've got over 2,000 venues that we work with and over 2 million users that are registered with Skip that use our service, and we provide that convenience for.
Cool, thank you very much. And Kim, I'll ask the same to you. You've explained a bit about yourself and Remitly.
Sure. First of all, personal endorsement for Skip. Love it. I use it literally every day. So
love you, Kim.
So my name's Kim Whitford. I'm head of Asia Pacific at Remitly. For those that don't know Remitly, we help customers transfer money internationally. We've got around 170 countries within our network and around 5,200 corridors. So a corridor is, a send to a receive location. Literally billions of bank accounts, mobile wallets, cash pickup locations. So, in the context of this conversation, it's a really vast network, and you can imagine the amount of data that we've got flying around the world. So quite a complex business to lead in Asia Pacific. Our headquarters are in Seattle. We opened our digital doors in Australia in 2018. So I also have the pleasure of working with a global business and being on the phone at all hours for those who know what that is like. It's quite a challenge.
Oh, thanks for giving that overview. Could you possibly expand upon, within the remittance industry, what types of challenges are you typically facing within that, especially around understanding customers and how to understand that data that others here may not have previously recognised?
Yeah. I think probably answer that in 2 ways. So there's sort of the customer lens and then there's the business lens. And again, I'm not the compliance expert from our business. I lead the business end to end. So one of the sayings that we have in our business is that trust is really hard to earn and really easy to lose. And from a customer perspective, our typical user of our services is a migrant that has moved to, say, Australia from India, and they're actually relying on our service to send money back to their family, sometimes for their day-to-day groceries, their school expenses. So we're in this really important position as a part of their sort of everyday life. And so how do we get a customer to trust us? And it's a very anxiety-inducing position you can imagine you're in, to say, all right, I'm going to pay this money into this app and it's going to end up in my wife or my children or my parents' bank account overseas. So there's an interesting, I guess, natural tension that we have where we want to create a product that is really easy to understand. And we're talking about, customers that have varying degrees of financial literacy. So you need to provide something that's super simple, really minimal friction, and very, very, very fast payment, because there's nothing worse than you put money in and then you can't see it coming out the other side. So we've got to do all of that. We also have to run all of our controls and compliance mechanisms to make sure that we do it in a really, really safe way and, protect our customers' data. So we've got this, and the challenge that I face every day is how do you walk that line of giving an optimal customer experience, but making sure all of those back-end processes run perfectly smoothly, because a customer won't sort of complain until it all blows up. So we've got that sort of customer challenge on the one side. And then from a business perspective, we have really thin margins and we're in a really, really competitive industry. So how do you sort of optimise your costs? And this is, running all of these controls, running these teams, trying to keep up with these bad actors that are constantly evolving. It's very, very expensive. So we're trying to make sure we have a really great price for our customers. We're minimising our COGS, but we're also protecting our customers' data. And then the final piece to all of this is we operate in a global business where we've got regs that are different from in every single country. So how do you make sure you maintain a standard that meets the compliance requirements for every single one of your 170 countries that you're operating in? And we have to do all of this and make sure our customers continue to come back every day and love using our service.
Yep, indeed. And Bill, so your industry is obviously quite a lot different to what Kim describes in certain ways. You mentions about, if customers annoyed, they leave you in seconds. I think we've even before coming on stage, you even talked about how you moved across and endorsed Skip because of exactly that same principle here. So, but the thing you still have in challenges, it's a very, very, in common is that it's a very, very competitive industry that you work in hospitality. So to build the best product in the market, I imagine that you need to be able to recognize and personalize your product towards your actual end customer. And obviously that involves data. So you need to balance this out. How are you, I suppose, approaching this from a business angle?
Yeah, I guess for us, customer data is obviously critical, like every other business. So for us, the data that we collect, we want to make sure that we get the value out of it, which enables us to do things like product type, business locations, purchasing patterns that helps give us the insights of our customers and the relevant recommendations when it comes to offers, their purchase patterns, what times, what deals we present in front of them. So holding on to personalised data for no good reason just doesn't make sense for us. So unless you need that data, do not hold on to it. And avoid as much risk as possible. And I guess I'll put a note here, we balance by making sure that we've got the right channels to connect with our users so that they're informed and engaged without holding on unnecessary data that keeps secure but still offers that or enables us to deliver that personalised and that engagement that we need to drive for both customers and our hospo partners as well.
And you mentioned just then saying, you don't want to maintain data or retain data for any longer than you have to. Is there a time as a lead in your role where you've actually thought, maybe we don't want to go down this road, like we don't want to kind of hold this data? Have you got any examples of where that may have come across, or is that something where you've done
we do.
enough?
So I guess when customers stop using Skip, which we don't want, but as any business, you do lose customers. For those particular customers, we've got the delete functionality, and again, that removes all data that's personalised whatsoever. We maintain the data that we require, again, purchase patterns, frequency, basket size, and so forth, but with everything else personalised, that removes completely.
Okay, cool. And I mentioned as well during the introduction, obviously, we've seen a lot of high-profile data breaches, obviously, recent one with an airline. Whenever you see this, is that something, Bill, that does actually concern yourself? Does it trigger you think, actually, do you then have a retrospective look internally and say, actually, is this something that could happen to us?
Yeah, fortunately enough, we haven't had a scenario, touch wood. But again, like every business, everyone's at risk. It's all about working with the right partners, making sure that the partners that you do work with have got that front of mind, and that's what they work on. I know that there's a few guys here from Fat Zebra, so they're a payment provider, which have been fantastic. So we sort of push that work onto them. For us, it's all about, even just internally with the team, making sure that everyone's across it. We're reviewing all the time and making sure that we're up to date with what's happening in the market to alleviate any issues. We've also got plans in place where if it does occur, we know exactly what process to follow, whether it's customer communication, merchant communication, and the path that we need if it does arise.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's always that business continuity plan you hope you never have to invoke.
Yeah.
There's always planning, always
processes. And until this day, yeah, we haven't used it, and I'm hoping it stays that way.
Perfect.
But again, yeah, who knows in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Kim, part of the narrative that we see with regards to any of these breaches is that ultimately it always ends up with some kind of payment, and being obviously cross-border remittance, that's one of the avenues things go down. So from my experience, and we spoke about this previously, there's always two scenarios for yourselves in terms of understanding the customer. So the first one being stopping those bad actors that may have been compromised from a data breach, and obviously not letting them in through your front door. And the second one being existing customers that may turn bad. Obviously, you've got data on understanding those patterns. So what types of data do you internally use to actually help detect, especially that second challenge on good customers go bad?
Yeah. You're right, that is actually really, and I think probably with most of the people in the room would have this challenge where there's one thing to gatekeep and prevent those bad actors from getting in, but it is certainly a different challenge altogether where you've got, a customer that's been behaving normally and is actually a really good customer for you, and then at one point you start to see signs of things are changing. I think the power of data, I know we talked about, you've got to be careful how much you want to hold on to, but also leveraging and harnessing the power of data. So we've got machine learning models that look at all sorts of signals to determine whether or not we can see the anomalies in the data. So things like, have we seen a change in transaction behaviour, cadence, who they're sending to, how much they're sending, where they're sending from, and then looking at device information, logins, etc. I think one thing as well that my compliance team has sort of a learning that they shared actually with me is just being really careful with your data in terms of having it clean and differentiated. And that's a real challenge that we have in our business, because we obviously want data that's really helpful that we can plug into our model, but it's got to be good data to begin with. And then you need to make sure that when you're training your models that they don't give false positives. And that's something that, leading the business, I want to get really, really surgical on, which is having a very, very tight control that does not block customers who are actually legitimate customers wanting to send money back home to their families that rely on it. So an example of that, to bring that to life, is you might have a model which looks at distance from home address is unusual, it's changed when a transaction happens. And we also might see a signal distance from credit card address. So they're actually the same thing, but it's flagged twice, and that might create a sort of false read on the increased risk of that transaction. So again, it's being really, really careful on how you train your models to make sure that when they flash up these risks that you're actually targeting the right customers. The second worst thing you can do is block a customer who's legitimate. The only thing worse than that is letting a bad actor get through. So it's walking that line, and that's something that, I'm constantly on the part of the business fighting to say, let's not be overzealous, let's get precise with all of our controls.
And just kind of touch upon what you said there, and I think we kind of touched upon when we were speaking previously. So when you're doing these investigations and you're looking at this, whenever we hear about data, it's usually my name, emails, it might be some of the payment credentials, but that investigative data that you have, and so that information like the distance to home, does your compliance team view that as data that you also kind of have to protect? I know that it's investigative data, but actually it's still valuable to people, especially if we talk about it from a social engineering standpoint.
Yes.
Is that something that your compliance team look into and they kind of categorized as something to protect as well?
Definitely. So I guess in our business, we've got 3 different categories of data. So you've got, and this is very simplistic, but you've got, the verification data, because we need to ID everyone. We're a AML regulated business. Then we've got our internal data, and then we've got third-party data that we use to run a business really well and also run our controls. When we pull all of that together and create these really sophisticated controls and get intelligence on where we see potential threats or weaknesses in our controls, that piece of data is actually incredibly valuable to those bad actors out there. So we need an extra layer of controls to protect the intelligence that we've garnered from our own data set. And this is sort of, we've got the benefit because we're a global business. We can pull things from all over the world to see trends, and it may not have happened in Australia, but we're seeing trends in the US. And so we've got to be really, really careful in protecting and maintaining security around the intel that our team has. We've got a very sophisticated team that are very capable, and we've spent a lot of money on these people and these processes to make sure that we stop the bad actors. So we obviously don't want that information to leak.
Yeah, great. And Bill, so you probably don't get the same scenario in terms of a good customer go bad, but in relation to the first part, so having a customer that maybe has used you and is more probably on the receiving end of payment fraud, is that something that you experience particularly often? And also, I guess, how are you managing that customer long term? So even from some of the, if it's an existing customer that's experiencing the fraud and you understand those behaviours, how are you kind of working on that?
I guess for us, we don't really have too many issues when it comes to, from a security perspective. We do get the obvious one where it's people testing different passwords and usernames and so forth. So that's probably the biggest thing for us. From a payment perspective, again, there's no payment details that we store within the business. So even if there was to be a leak, they're not really going to get much apart from someone's order, their coffee, what their coffee order is, what their breakfast order is. So for us, we're pretty safe from that perspective, not maintaining that payment. But again, it's something that we've spent years fighting. Like we use OTPs, rate limiting, suspicious login flagging, which flags a system that highlights it for us, and then forced resets. And I think that's the big thing that we've started introducing, forced resets. No one wants to change their password. But again, for us, that's how we mitigate any risk.
And even though you say about the payment details not being stored and you've kind of off-boarded that details around things like coffee orders is still quite valuable data. And the reason I say this is, even speaking to people in this, at Intersekt this year, was saying, social engineering is getting incredibly complicated, where someone's saying, actually, I'm the cafe down the road. Hey, I've never actually, I didn't receive the payment. Can you please? And they might ask for the PAN or something. So even though that is there, have you had any of those situations happen before? You've been quite lucky across the.
We've been quite lucky. We've had scenarios where we've had different business partners that have had a falling out, and they've contacted us trying to get into the system to understand how much revenue is getting put through and so forth. So we've created different steps and approaches to mitigate that, where we'll ask email address, contact details, we'll call them back on the number that's registered on our system to avoid any of that.
Yeah, okay, good. That's good to understand. So from a business perspective, it's great to hear what these challenges are and how you're actually kind of approaching this. And then final question, I think we've got just over 5 minutes left. So we have a bunch of founders, a bunch of startups, scale-ups in this room. What message would you give them, Bill, in relation to your experience in navigating something like this? Because it can be quite a challenging topic sometimes. People just want to run a business, they want to make money, they want to exit or whatever, or what's going to go through. What would be your advice when it sounds like a very compliance-heavy topic to go through? I
guess you keep the data that you need. The data that you don't need, get rid of it. You want to minimise the surface risk as much as possible. And again, don't hold on to it unless you need to. That's the only bit of advice that I would give you. It just increases your risk, increases the issues, increases your vulnerability. It's all about, removing it as much and quickly as possible.
Thank you. And Kim, over to you. As
can I add one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
And also prepare your team. Make sure that your team's on the journey with you, that they understand that it's not just an IT issue, it's an everyone issue. Be alert, be aware, and have the proper processes ready to go if it does happen. Again, no one wants it to happen, but just be prepared.
Yeah, I think that's quite key. You've heard of some of the breaches recently being through a third party, through a call centre where they weren't part of the journey, and so therefore they didn't realise what was going on.
And your response time is time critical.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And so Kim, as the head of Asia Pacific, and you've kind of referenced it earlier, having to work with multiple time zones, and given the headquarters in the US, who sometimes think, where's this small island that we live on? Is there something the audience could take away in terms of balancing the need for local and regional compliance when some of the decisions can be taken out of your hands by teams that don't really know the region?
Yeah, it is an ongoing challenge. I'm not going to say a battle, but you definitely feel like you're fighting for Australia and APAC often when you're dealing with my wonderful American counterparts who are sensational, by the way, but often wake me up at 3 a.m. with urgent meetings. I think from a reg and compliance perspective, one thing that's you have to keep on reminding everyone is that everywhere is different. So yes, we want to operate a safe, reliable business that's trustworthy, etc. But every regime has its nuances, and even the ones that are quite similar, sometimes the regulators prioritise different things at different times, and that usually reflects what's going on in the market at that time. So conversations I'll have with my American team is, they're focused on sanctions or state-by-state licensing, whereas Australia, we're actually known as having really heavy-hitting regulators in the AML space. We're also, we've got mandatory breach reporting, privacy is a real focus here. So often my role is actually sort of bridging that gap to remind them what might work there won't necessarily work here, so let's just rethink about how that control operates, etc., and make sure that we get this right for the customers that are here, because there is quite a variation, I think, in how you actually apply a best practice model by region, and I guess that's even true of within my own region. Australia's different from Singapore, different from New Zealand, etc. So I think the other final thing that I will add, which we've found is a real important thing, especially for global businesses, is the power and the importance of having local expertise that can face into the regulators and actually meet them face to face and have that conversation. My view is that sitting in the chair with a regulator and being accountable and showing that you are here, you are in Australia, and you care about the business and you are responsible for the business here, I think is a very important message to send to regulators. And that's something that we continually remind our American colleagues, and I've got colleagues all around the world, but how important it is to actually sort of front up and have those discussions face to face.
Yeah, not just rocking up 30 minutes before on a Zoom call. This will work, actually.
Don't do that.
No, that's great. Thank you very much for your time. I think we've only got a minute left or so. I understand that it is lunchtime coming up. Any final words to the audience from either of the two of you?
Download Skip if you haven't used it before. It's free to download.
Well, I have to say download Remitly as well. No time.
I can't follow this up with Mastercard, so that's a bit of a problem. So, no, thank you very much all for taking the time to come and go through this. Look forward to catching up with you all. We'll just be in the social area, and also in the exhibition hall. Mastercard has a booth there, and there's a Messina cart, so come get some ice cream and look forward to catching up.
Thank you.